and welcome to the 11th session of the British Council Higher Education Dialogue Series. My name is Summer Shah, and I'm the Country Director of the British Council in Azerbaijan and the Regional Higher Education Programme Director for a region we call Wider Europe, consisting of 15 countries, including Turkey, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Western Balkans, Central Asia, and South Caucasus. As part of our At Home with the British Council programme, we started this Higher Education Dialogue series back in May to create a platform for knowledge sharing and identifying common solutions in our response to COVID-19 worldwide in the higher education sector. Week after week, we have brought together experts from all over the world in the higher education sector to share their experience and ideas, tackling some of the common challenges we all face, such as digital delivery, students and staff engagement, online quality assurance, and student mobility, to name a few. Today's session will be the last one of the current series, and what a panel we've got for you today. We're going to talk about the role of science with two esteemed speakers who are scientists themselves. The first British astronaut, Helen Sharman, and the award-winning science communicator, Jim Al-Khalili. Before I introduce them, I want to remind everyone that your participation to this conversation is just as important. So please share with us your thoughts and your questions in the Q&A section, and like those that resonate with you, and we will try our best to address as many as possible in the next 16 minutes. The session will be recorded and we will send you a link afterwards so that you can watch it and share it with anyone who can't join us right now. Professor Jim Al-Khalili, who's a physicist, author and broadcaster and one of the best known science communicators in the UK. Jim has written 12 books on popular science, between them translated into over 26 languages, as well as his first novel. He's a regular presenter of TV science documentaries and the long-running Radio 4 program, The Live Scientific. Jim, it's a privilege to have you on our panel today. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Summer. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a long-standing and deep affection for the British Council, and I'll explain why that came about in a moment. I don't have any pictures to show, so sort of Helen's trumped me on that, but then I've not been into space either, so I'm not going to compete. Yes, let me say a little bit about myself, about my career, because I think it's probably my generation of scientists who have been able to continue doing what they're doing, particularly for me as an academic research physicist, as well as being public facing and promoting and engaging with wider society about science. I remember when I first started my academic career at university after PhD and then wanting to get a lectureship, I was warned off doing science communication. I was told that, look, Jim, focus on your research, publishing papers, getting your data, applying for research grants, doing all the things that academic does, teaching undergraduates, and leave the communicating of the science to those who've got spare time, which seemed crazy to me because the most passionate people about science are the people who are doing it, who've done it, who have a story to tell. And so gradually throughout my career, I managed to balance both remaining as an active academic, as you say, I'm now professor of physics at the University of Surrey, but at the same time enjoying my writing and broadcasting. I've always derived, I guess, as much pleasure explaining complex ideas in physics. So my background is in quantum physics, the theory of atoms and the particles that make up atoms, famously very mathematical, very obscure, very sort of mind-boggling and counterintuitive. But I love trying to get it across to non-experts as best as I can, and I get as much pleasure seeing as we say, the penny drops, seeing the moment of enlightenment, of realization as someone understands a concept they haven't before because of the way I put it across. As much pleasure as I do learning something myself for the first time, which is why I wanted to carry on with both. Now, my background, for many who don't know me, Al-Khalili is an Arabic name. In fact, it's Persian in origin. My great, I think about 4 or 5 grandfathers on my father's side came from Iran and settled in Iraq. So my father from Iraq came to the UK, where he met my English mother when he was studying engineering. They married, went back to Iraq. I was born in Baghdad. And so I grew up in a household very much sort of British sort of surroundings. The BBC World Service was constantly on in the background. English was my first language. But at the same time, I went to school in Iraq, and I'm now bilingual, English and Arabic. And we would come over to the UK to visit my maternal grandparents every few summers. And then finally, when I was 16, we settled in the UK, and I carried on with my education. The reason why I'm telling you this sort of long-winded biography is because growing up in Baghdad, we didn't have access to libraries of English books. We didn't have access to sort of the TV documentaries, the sort of the little science communication there would have been on TV in the UK. Of course, we didn't have. A lot of my contemporaries fell in love with people like Carl Sagan's Cosmos series. I'd never got a chance to watch that, but we did have the British Council. Then the British Council in Baghdad had a library, and in that library there were wonderful books, and I would spend as often as I would visit there, and I'd borrow as many books as they would allow me to, and I'd churn through them. So it really helped me develop a broader view than just my education provided me with. So for me, science communication is more than simply telling the wider public about the latest discoveries of the Higgs boson, or a planet orbiting a distant star, or what a black hole is like. It's much broader than that. As Helen touched on, communicating the importance of STEM subjects is probably more vital now than ever. We do hear all around the world, governments, particularly in now trying to combat this terrible pandemic, that they are following the scientific evidence, that they are being advised by scientists to put policies in place. By and large, governments, apart from those individuals who may be denying science, who are anti-science in their attitudes, by and large, governments are trying to do their best. But politicians don't often understand how science works. Science is changing, and it's ever changing, particularly something like this coronavirus. We are learning all the time. So one of the most important things for me about communicating science isn't just getting across that knowledge, the fascinating stuff, and putting it in the right language that people can be inspired by. Yes, that's important. We need to inspire the next generation of scientists and engineers. It's also explaining how science works. The idea that we are never certain about things. Well, sometimes I'm certain that if I jump off a roof, gravity is going to pull me down. I'm not going to float up into the air. But we should also always harbour doubts about our views and opinions, because a scientific theory could always be replaced by a better one when more data or evidence comes in. Scientists, and this would be so refreshing if politicians could do this as well, scientists don't mind admitting when they're wrong. If I have a theory that makes some prediction about some, let's say in my area in quantum physics, that then some experiment shows is wrong or deficient in some way, I'll say, fine, great, that theory was wrong. Let's try and find a better explanation. We're always looking to learn more, gain more knowledge about the world around us. And we know we get it wrong, and there's no harm or shame in admitting when we get it wrong. Something politicians, I think, find it rather more difficult to do. So for me, science communication is as vital as my own academic research is. As you've mentioned, Summer, I've written books on popular science. I've made TV documentaries. I mean, if I'm honest, I do it not altruistically. I do it because I enjoy it. It gives me pleasure to try and find ways of explaining science, of getting across the idea of science and how important it is. When people come up to me and say, you know, I decided to do a physics degree because I watched your TV documentary, that not only makes me feel proud that, you know, that I've done something, you know, important. I think I always find it surprising because I feel I'm doing what I'm doing because I enjoy it, and it's sort of almost unexpected when I find that other people found it important and useful as well. So it's great that we have events like this where we can talk openly about why we do what we do and why it's so important to get across the way we do science. And I think I should stop there.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Jim. And well, I mean, you enjoy doing it. We really enjoy listening to you. And so I think even, you know, from the screen, I can feel your passion. And I think that is really important. Whatever we do, you know, that passion can really send out a strong message and inspire and motivate people to join the courses. And of course, there's so many things you said, you know, in your sort of opening remarks that really resonate with me. You know, critical thinking, taking an evidence-based approach, learning from our mistakes, and you know, of course, the power of science communication. But what struck me the most was the important role the British Council has played in your, you know, growing up and in your career in becoming who you are today. So I mean, that's beautiful. I mean, we continue to hear these wonderful stories globally about the role we as a cultural relations organization and the way we have created an access to science, to the outside world for many people in different countries and territories. And it's just amazing to hear how our library has given you that chance to learn more and then help you to, you know, play a small part in you becoming who you are today. Excellent. Now, I want to sort of unpick a bit more about the role of science. So in fact, you know, that's the main question we asked in this session today. We also asked our audience this question in a pre-event row. So before I come to the panel, I want to share with you what our audience have told us when we asked them, has the role of science been strengthened by this pandemic? So let me just share with everyone the screen, and then you'll be able to see that actually the majority of our audience have said yes, the role of science has been strengthened, with a small percentage saying, okay, it's a bit early to say, and very few say that no, it hasn't been strengthened. So which I think, you know, echoes what you both have been saying. And the other thing that, of course, I think you touched upon as well, increasingly, we're seeing more scientists across different media than we have done ever before, on TV, on social media. We often see now politicians coming out accompanied by scientists. Take Professor Chris Whitty, for example, who is the Chief Medical Officer for England, who often accompanies the Prime Minister in the UK in the daily briefings. He now has 250,000 followers, but before the pandemic, he wasn't nearly as well known. So would you agree with our audience that the role of science has been strengthened in this since the start of this pandemic? And do you think the pandemic has supported greater visibility for scientists who in the past might have been kept behind the scenes?
No, I agree. I think we're clearly seeing, you know, some people regard science as absolute, that science is about fact, and therefore if you tell me something this week and next week you change your mind, tell me something different, well, those are two facts that are contradictory, therefore I can't trust anything you say. So scientists don't know what they're talking about. So I think that's right, that is a danger. Which is why we do have to get across how science develops, how you know, you come up with a hypothesis, you gather data, as you get more observational data, you learn more, that means you adjust and you improve your understanding. And it's certainly a good thing that science is more visible. Certainly here in the UK, government ministers and different departments have always had for many years now their science advisors helping them develop policies. Of course, politicians develop policies that depend on more than just scientific evidence. They've got to take into lots of other things into account, economic, public acceptability, and so on, their own ideological views. But now with the pandemic, we're seeing that scientific advice is brought to the fore. The danger is that, you know, if politicians get the policy wrong, there's that worry that they turn around and say, well, it was the science that's to blame. It's the science that gave us the wrong evidence. And I think the wider society understanding how science works, that we do learn from our mistakes, is absolutely vital, because this virus and all aspects of it, we've seen much more visibility. But even there, you know, you've got virologists, you've got epidemiologists, you've got people who are trying to develop vaccines, you've got the social scientists trying to understand human behavior when you put societies under lockdown, and what other issues that leads to. So it's very broad and it's complicated, and that's why there are different views and there are different scientists. Some highlighting the importance of face masks, others are highlighting other aspects. Some are talking about whether or not what fraction of society has developed immunity, how long immunity lasts for. We don't know. And the thing is, there's no shame in not knowing. We are trying to understand. For me, there is the worry that, particularly with social media, you know, there are conspiracy theories that abound. There are, you know, people who deny the science, and there are lots of different views. And the average person who follows Twitter or Facebook or even news networks finds it very difficult to disentangle what is valid, what is careful, evidence-based, peer-reviewed science, and what is just some guy's opinion, you know, in the name of science. So it's very hard. It's very hard for society to know what to believe and what to trust at a time when trusting in scientific evidence is probably of greater importance than it's ever been before.
Yeah, thank you, both of you, for that input. And I guess that actually moves us quite nicely onto the role of science communication when there is such a high volume of science out there, and then different views from different scientists. Then, you know, you could argue that it's even more important for scientists to be able to communicate effectively with the general public. I mean, we at the British Council certainly see that. So, Jim, you will know that we have been running the world's leading science communication competition, FameLab, for a number of years now in many countries around the globe, where the participants, usually young scientists and researchers, would be given 3 minutes to inspire and educate a live audience of the research they are doing in science, engineering, maths, and other subjects. So what impact, in your personal experience as a successful science communicator, do you think hearing from scientists has had on the general public?
I think communicating science in the last 20 years, certainly in the UK. I mean, I've always argued that the UK is actually leading the world in public engagement in science, because, well, you know, we have broadcasters like the BBC that will make science documentaries. We have science festivals in almost every town and city in the country. We have popularizers of science in universities. You know, not just me, there are many other scientists who have been given the space and the credibility to go out and talk to the wider public. And that's something that's happened in the last 10, 20 years at an accelerating rate. So things are much brighter now in terms of communicating science than they've ever been before. But of course, as you've mentioned, Summer, on the other side, there's a lot of noise. There are a lot of voices. You know, I mean, it's very easy, and we can laugh and you know and debunk silly notions like, you know, the Earth is flat or the moon landings never happened. It's more serious when we want to find the best way to communicate the importance of vaccines, for example. You know, there's a movement of people who are very untrusting of vaccinations, you know, or people who are who think the whole coronavirus is a conspiracy. It's a weapon. The Chinese, there are people in China who think it was developed by the US. There are people in the US who think it was developed by China. There are people who think it's created by 5G network masts. So, your average person isn't silly. They're not curious or able to think critically and rationally. It's just that when they're bombarded with all of this, we need to find a way for science communicators to get through and say, look, you can trust this source, you can believe this because of such and such. That is untrustworthy. It's not based on evidence. It's based on the opinion of someone who has an other ideological or political motive for promoting an idea. But it's a tough job, but that doesn't mean we should shy away from it.
I completely agree with you, Jim. And then just to follow up on that, I want to ask a question that came from the live audience. And do you think that the world of alternative facts, truth, has damaged the credibility of science? And what can we all do to counter that?
It is sometimes I don't despair, but I could certainly see the difficulty that a lot of psychologists and social scientists talk about something called cognitive dissonance, which is the idea that if you hold a particular view, on something, then hearing evidence to the contrary, you dismiss it. It makes you actually feel mentally uncomfortable. So you downplay any evidence that conflicts with your existing views or opinions. But the flimsiest of evidence that might support what you think, you build it up to confirm even more what you already know. So sometimes you can think it's quite hard to change people's minds. If a conspiracy theorist, if I talk to a conspiracy theorist, I say, what would it take for me to persuade you that you're wrong? And invariably they'll say nothing. They are so, it doesn't, and that's why a conspiracy theory is so different from a scientific theory, because in science, any evidence that I think is valid and accurate and reliable that conflicts with my view would force me to change my view. That's the way science develops. So it is hard when we live in a world, as you say, of alternative facts or fake news. For a person who believes a particular thing, anything opposing their view is fake news. It's not fake news because it's not based on evidence. It's fake news because they don't like to hear it, because it goes against what they feel. And I think we've always had these ideological sort of polarized views and opinions in society, whether it's cultural or religious or whatever. We're seeing it highlighted now because maybe of social media. The people at the extremes of particular views tend to shout the loudest, and the silent majority in the middle seem to think that everything's polarized. But I don't think social media has particularly exacerbated things. I think we've always had that. But it doesn't mean that those of us who are trying to get across the idea that you should think critically and rationally and be evidence-based, we shouldn't give up hope that we can get that message across if we try hard enough.
Thank you. I want to move us on to talk about international collaboration, which you both touched upon during your initial remarks. And part of our role at the British Council is to connect the UK with other countries through scientific international research collaborations, discussions and engagement. And I guess what we're observing is that perhaps one of the silver linings of this pandemic is that it actually brought the communities closer together. So we're seeing that universities are collaborating, across the UK and internationally as well. So are you observing that as well in terms of science? And what more can we do to ensure there's greater knowledge sharing and international collaboration when there is limitation on travel?
I would try and get support for Helen's idea of getting a World Science Association set up, and I would sort of advocate very strongly for that to happen. I think that's a wonderful idea, because I think a lot of people don't appreciate that You know, you have these different separate nations with political borders, and they have their own economic and political and you know, business interests and commercial interests that are sort of quite separate. And they don't appreciate that under the surface, we scientists have always, for us, well, certainly during our lifetimes, have always been international. We go to international conferences. You know, I look around my physics department at the University of Surrey, and there are people from so many different nations, and it just doesn't occur to us to do anything any differently. And certainly when you get something like the coronavirus pandemic, which requires global sort of participation, then suddenly people are seeing, oh, scientists are collaborating, they're working together. And, you know, we shouldn't forget, we have climate change to deal with, we have dwindling resources to deal with, we have so many global challenges that we have to tackle in the 21st century, and countries aren't going to be able to do it alone. Even if politicians decide to you know, get into trade wars with each other or ideological arguments, scientists are always going to work together. I think we've got to get that message across.
Definitely, and then that's one of the purposes of us setting up, you know, this dialogue series, to create a togetherness so that we can support each other, challenge each other, and come up with common solutions. That's great. Thank you both. I want to touch upon women in science and STEM subjects. I think you both talk about how important that was. And before I do that, we actually have a couple of live poll questions I want to ask the audience to participate so that we can get their views on what they think is needed to get more women into science, and also, do they think if STEM subjects will become more popular as a result of this pandemic. So I post that link of the live poll, so everyone who's watching, if you can click on that and let us know your view, that would be great. What can we do to encourage more women in science?
The fact that not enough girls at school are going to subjects like physics or chemistry, but physics in particular, is because it's perceived as a boy subject. A lot of the women physicists that I know who've made it to the very top, you know, senior professors, fellows of the Royal Society, when you ask them about their science education at school, very often they say, I went to an all-girls school. So physics wasn't seen as a boy subject. There weren't boy subjects and girl subjects, and therefore they were free to do the subjects that they felt passionate about, rather than having it knocked out of them, as you say, Helen, because it's not seen as an appropriate subject for girls. So that has to change. That subjects should not be seen as applying to you know, to whether you're male or female. The other thing is role models. You know, Helen, you're an example. I mean, there's no denying, you know, the first British astronaut is a woman. It's something we probably don't shout about quite enough, in my view. Certainly, you know, young girls, when they look to see, you know, what you don't want to see is that all scientists are stereotypically white, middle-aged men, very often bald. Although, you know, I've got a tan, so I'm sort of, you know, not quite as white as some. So diversity is very important in STEM. I don't just mean, you know, diversity, you know, more women, although of course that's the most important thing, since women make up half the population. But diversity in terms of cultural backgrounds, diversity in terms of you know, racial sort of broad distributions. You know, in countries like the UK, we don't have the same distribution in terms of gender, race, culture, religion, other identities in science as we do in wider society. And you're going to have to ask the question why, because that benefits science. Being able to tackle problems, coming at it with a different worldview, a different perspective, can actually help solve problems in science. It's not just about, well, it's fact, it's knowledge, and it doesn't matter whether you're black or white, man or woman, you're going to solve that equation or do that experiment. No, a lot of science is about how you think about the world, and getting different ways of thinking about it is absolutely vital. And if we're cutting off half the population because certain areas of science are not deemed as suitable for girls to study, It's just crackers.
We'll just quickly show you the results from the live poll. I think our audience are agreeing with you. So what is needed to get more women into science? Role models, and expose young girls to STEM, and also, combat stereotypes, which, goes back to the point Jim made about diversity and inclusion, which is so important. And on a positive note, the audience also told us, the majority of them, that STEM subjects will become more popular as a result of this pandemic. So hopefully we'll see more young girls and boys choosing STEM subjects and becoming scientists like yourself and science communicators in the future. There is an increasing risk of misunderstanding and miscalculation in space. The UK thinks the time is right to take a holistic view and is leading work to reduce space threats through responsible behaviours. Jim, would you elaborate on why space is so relevant for everybody, and what are the socio-economic benefits of space?
Yeah, I think there is that idea that space is out there to explore in the same way that, why do we climb Mount Everest? Because it's there, because of humanity's sort of thirst for adventure. It's, governments don't plow billions of pounds, dollars, whatever, into space technology just because astronauts want to go and explore and have an adventure. They wouldn't waste that sort of money if it wasn't absolutely crucial to the well-being of our economies and our societies in the future. Just one example is telecommunications. We all use mobile phones that all use GPS technology to locate where you are in the world. GPS is more than just finding where you are. GPS helps us map the Earth, to study Earth's weather systems. It helps in emergencies, if there are natural disasters, for relief efforts. It helps with agriculture. It helps all sorts of areas. But just the GPS itself is absolutely vital, and it depends on satellite technology. Satellites put in orbit, and whenever you want to find out where you are, your phone is receiving signals from several satellites out in space, and it's using those positions of those satellites to triangulate its position. And the science and engineering and technology that's gone into those is absolutely remarkable. And without space technologies being developed, we wouldn't have that. So it's not just about going and looking for life on Mars. It's about so much more than that. We as a human race, we are expanding, developing our technologies. Sooner or later, we're going to want to explore the stars, and that's inevitable. But along the way, there are these huge societal benefits because of the technologies that are spin-offs from our space research.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask one last question as we bring the session to a close, a question that was submitted by a participant before the session started. What do you wish you knew as a young person? The advice you would give your younger self, maybe just what someone needs to hear right now.
I think, when I was 10, 11, 12, 13 and just starting to get interested in science, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Who does at that age? My advice would be, follow your passion. Choose those subjects at school that, not necessarily the ones that you find easy, but the ones that you find that get you excited, get you enthused. That's what you should follow. Don't follow subjects because that's going to lead to a career that, your parents probably would wish for you. Resist that. Do follow your passion. If your passion is in science, whether it's in physical sciences, whether it's in medical sciences, whether it's in space exploration, whether it's in geology, science is so broad. If that is your passion, then pursue it, because chances are that's what you'll excel at.
On that positive note, I'm afraid I'll have to bring this session to a close. Jim, thank you so much for such a rich, stimulating and inspiring conversation. I've enjoyed it tremendously and learned a huge amount myself. And to everyone who's watching, as we take a summer break of the current dialogue series, I also want to take the opportunity to thank all previous speakers, the audience and my colleagues at the British Council for making these sessions possible. We will be in touch to share with you our future plans to continue these important discussions and what we will do at the British Council to help address some of these challenges we all face. Stay safe and see you again soon. Bye bye.